In this video I will show how to create this graph based on this input data here. The graph shows number of deaths per 10,000 individuals depending on body mass index and smoking status. I hope you will enjoy this video. This is our input data. We have body mass index here and smoking status here, non-smoker 1 to 10 cigarettes per day and more than 10 cigarettes per day. And the numbers here are number of deaths per 10,000 individuals. To create the graph, I select the whole table and go to Insert. And here I can choose a chart. I choose now column. And sometimes it can be hard to find the right chart type directly, but it's easy to change afterwards. Anyway, here I see that I want a 3D column and it's gonna look something like this one here. So I choose this one. And this is what I get by default. So what we want to do is to change the colors of these columns and also the shape. We want the graph to show smoking status here instead of series 1, 2, 3. And we want to have the body mass indexes here instead of 1, 2, 3, 4. And finally also a title for the whole graph. I start with the columns. I double click on any column and this dialog box shows up. On the first option here, series option, I can control the distance between the columns. We change here, for example, we see what happens to the graph. They become thinner. And gap width, we get the greater distance between the columns. Shape, I can choose box like now, pyramid, partial pyramid and so on, and I will choose cylinder in this case. And on this fill option I can control the color of the column. I will choose solid fill and I will choose a light gray. I will choose this one. I could also choose gradient fill, so we have a gradient over the column. I could use a picture or a texture file like this and change this to something else. I could use a pattern fill like a zebra like this, and here we have the automatic, the default, but I'll choose this light gray now. Border color, border styles, that's the border around it, I will not touch those. Shadow is a shadow down here. Let's see what happens if I drag this one out a bit. I get the start of a shadow here that I could control in different ways, but I leave this one without a shadow. Glow and soft edges, I will leave this one as well, but this one 3D format I will use to change the form of the top of this cylinder. And I will use this one here. Down here you can control the form of the whole cylinder. You can change to this one down here, for example. They got a bit transparent, but I keep this one, the standard. And I press close. So that was the first series, and I will do the same thing with the other two series, but I will just use another color, a bit darker gray here and even more dark gray here. So I double click again. I go into shape, I choose cylinder. Fill, I choose solid fill, and this time a dark gray. Let's choose this one here. Shadow 3D format. I change the form of the top. And I press close. And the last series, I double click again. I control the shape to a cylinder. I choose solid fill. And now I want an even darker gray to separate it from this series here. So I go to color, and I can't choose a darker gray here, but I can choose more colors down here. And I click here to get this even darker gray. Something like that maybe. And I press OK. And finally the top, like this. Okay, so now we're done with the formatting of the columns. Next, let's change this to say non-smoker 1 to 10 cigarettes per day, more than 10 cigarettes per day, instead of series 1, 2, 3. And I will delete this label here. Just select it and press delete. To get this series name linked to the cells here, I will right-click on the graph and choose Select Data. And I get this dialog box. So here I have series 1, 2, 3, which are these here. And over here I have something 1, 2, 3, 4, which probably is this here. But I start with the series 1 and I choose Edit. Here we have the series values, D6 to D9, these values here. And the series name, I click here to choose this cell here to report the series name, and I press enter and OK. And we see that now it says non-smoker here instead of series 1. And I do the same thing with the series 2 and 3. Okay. Now if I change this cell here, the information in the graph will change as well. So if I change this to smoker, press enter, the graph updates. I press Ctrl Z to undo. And I will use the same dialog box to change these numbers to the body mass index categories. I right click and choose Select Data. Here we have the numbers we want to change. I press Edit, Axis Label Range. I will use these labels here. I press enter and they show up here, and OK. OK again. I make the graph a bit bigger, and I want to format these. I will make them gray, a bit bigger, and maybe bold. So I press Ctrl B to make them bold, and I can format them directly here. So I choose this gray, the darkest gray, and make them size 12 maybe, like this. And I'll do the same with these labels here. I select them with the left click, press Ctrl B to make them bold, the gray color, and size 12. And I will use the same format on the y-axis. Bold, Ctrl B, gray, and size 12. To add a title to the x-axis, I go up to Layout and notice that you won't be able to see these three chart tools if you haven't selected the graph. So if you select a cell outside the graph, these options disappear, but once you select the graph, they appear. So go to Layout, Axis Title, Primary Horizontal Axis Title, and Title Below Axis. I click to enter the title, I press Ctrl A to select everything, and I write Body Mass Index, BMI. And I format this in the same way as the other information. I make it bold, it is already bold, gray, and a bit bigger. And finally, a title for the whole graph. I go to Layout, Chart Title, Centered Overlay Title, or above chart I will choose Centered Overlay Title. I click to enter, Ctrl A to select everything, and write deaths per 10,000 individuals. Ctrl A again, and I make this gray. I could keep the size probably, and I drag it to the upper right corner, like this. I could make the whole graph area a bit tighter to make the title more visible. One last thing you might want to control is the 3D rotation, the angle on the view of this graph. So just right click and go to 3D rotation. and here you can control the X and Y rotation as well as the perspective. So let's see what happens. I increase this rotation here and we see it more from the side. If I increase the Y rotation, we see it more from the top. Decrease it to 0, it's like we're standing on the ground. And perspective is like how far away we are watching this. I will choose these settings here: 15-degree perspective, 10-degree Y rotation and 20-degree X rotation. And I press close. And I notice that one of my labels here disappeared, and I will just make the graph bigger and it will pop up. Here we go. And here we have our finished graph.